I grew up in a Greek home in Zambia. My Greek mother and Zambian father separated when I was 8, and after that point, I was pretty much raised by my mom. Learning to understand my two distinct cultures and to embrace them has been both exciting and challenging. One of the biggest challenges I've faced is figuring out which elements from either culture to pick in order to assimilate into my own way of life. This is obviously a very deep issue and one that I continue to better my understanding of. However, a major breakthrough for me was when I realized that I could turn to music to explore my bicultural background. As an 8-year-old, my favorite part of the day was my extra music class after school. It wasn't anything fancy. It was nothing close to a traditional music conservatory training. It was more about expressing myself, playing the music that I loved, and feeling totally free. I remember telling my mom on several occasions after these lessons that playing music made me feel like flying. By the age of 12, I had become obsessed with rap music and hip-hop. I used to loop intro sections of Dr. Dre and Scott Storch records onto cassette tapes that I would rap to, until a friend of mine gave me a piece of music production software back then called Fruity Loops 3.4. That marked the beginning of my journey in music production. The rap phase ended after a couple of years, and in 2009, when Stereo Love came out by Edward Maya, I was blown away because I saw the potential that electronic dance music had for fusion. And that's exactly what he did with that song by fusing Balkan music with European dance music. Now, throughout my teenage years, I was also formally studying classical piano. And at the age of 18, I decided to apply to the Berklee College of Music in Boston. It wasn't easy coming from Zambia, a country full of talent, but very limited access to formal music training, and having to compete with students that were enrolled in European or American conservatories from the age of 5 or 6. Nevertheless, I did manage to get in, and during my time at Berklee, I was finally exposed to the music of different cultures and styles, and to some of the most proficient musicians on this planet. My experience there really opened my eyes, and I developed a strong passion for world music. Halfway through my course, I was forced to drop out due to financial reasons. And so I came back home to Zambia and started my career as a DJ producer. Being both Zambian and Greek, I decided to use my interesting DNA cocktail as a template for my musical aspirations by fusing African music with European music in the realm of house music. Now this brings me to the topic of my presentation today, which is fusion in electronic dance music. What is fusion music? Fusion music is simply the combination of elements of different genres. In this case, the genre of sub-Saharan African music with the genre of European melodic house music. As we all know, African music is extremely rich in its polyrhythmic complexities, however, not as rich, but just as beautiful in its melodies and harmonies. European art music, or call it Western classical music, is pretty much the opposite, with a fairly simple rhythmic structure and a much more profound harmonic and melodic system. This, for the most part, also applies to European melodic house, where you have a simple four-on-the-floor kick pattern, doom, doom, doom. That's quite familiar to most of us, from the club scene, with a backbeat for the core of the rhythm section, and a more elaborate melodic and harmonic composition over that beat. Usually when African music is fused with other genres, it's the rhythm section that is borrowed. However, for the kind of fusion music that I like to make, I prefer to borrow from the melodic and harmonic pockets of African music, whilst maintaining a more traditional European house rhythm. In a moment, we're going to take a look at a short excerpt taken from one of my own songs entitled Something's Coming. This is a song that I did with a very talented singer-songwriter based in LA called Kayla Jacobs. It came out just a few weeks ago in Universal Music, and we're going to show you a little excerpt.
And I said, something's coming. Elation whispered, it's nothing to dread. just waiting. Magic was late again. We've got something for you, my friend. On my way home, someone named Fate called, singing a bed to thought I'd forgotten your name. I was just waiting. Magic was late again. We've got something for you, my friend.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. From this excerpt, we can pick out a couple of fusion elements. Now, some of them are really subtle and will only become clear to you when I go into the next section of my presentation. But some of you might have picked them out, such as the Kalindula guitar, the African guitar in the post-chorus, the marimba, the organ, which is typically used in the music of Southern Africa, and in the chord progression of the chorus and post-chorus, which is a typical African chord progression. So evidently, the epicenter of the fusion occurs in the post-chorus, and we're going to dig into that section a little bit further to see exactly what's going on. We're going to start by looking at the rhythm section, which is, as I mentioned earlier, a standard European house rhythm. Nothing fancy. Very straightforward, 4 on the floor kick with a backbeat and some hand percussion, which could technically be considered a fusion element as well. But watch what happens when I add the bass. It's still going to be really bare, but the bass outlines the harmonic progression. So it's going to give you this hint at some sort of fusion going on, because the chord progression, which is outlined by the bass line, is very typical in African music, the 1-4, 1-5. A lot of African music is based on this progression. So let's hear that now. So you might have picked that out, although it's super boomy in this room. The next layer we're going to add is the organ and the keys. The organ, like I said, is typically used in the music of Southern Africa and simply adds this nice flavor to the mix. So let's hear that. And now we're going to add the marimba, which is very, very, very African and reinforces this sense of fusion. Now the next element is the most important fusion element, which is the Kalindula guitar, the traditional African guitar. And that's because it's the most authentic element to traditional African music. And when I play it on its own in a second, it might remind you of something that you would come across on a world music playlist because of how authentically traditional it is. But when it's mixed with all these other elements, it creates this nice Afro-European piece of house music, as opposed to a traditional piece of African music or a very typical piece of European house music. So let's listen to this guitar on its own. So quite traditional, right? Now watch what happens when all these elements work together. You heard it like a minute ago, and now you'll hear it again with a different kind of perception in your head. The amazing thing, thank you. Thank you. The amazing thing about electronic music is that you can literally fuse anything you want with it, almost anyhow, as long as you maintain that fixed beat in the back. Now, the concept of fusion music doesn't necessarily have to do with your cultural background. There are many artists who choose to draw inspiration from cultures and styles other than their own. The bottom line here is not me standing on this stage telling you what can be done, or how it should be done. It's about creating art that is honest and art that truly represents who you are. Thank you very much.